Yes, good evening. This is Philip Sobolove, live from Mombasa, Kenya. I'm talking tonight about the nature of love and the nature of ego. One way to describe it is like oil and water. The two cannot mix. Where there is love, there is no ego. And where there is ego, there is no love. Just like fear and love. Where there's love, there's no fear. And where there's fear, there is no love. Because ego is what creates psychological fear. In my book, Messages of Awakening, I talk about two kinds of fear. One fear has to do with being threatened in the moment by something, an animal, a person, whatever, circumstance, whatever, some kind of a threatening situation where your body reacts automatically to protect you and survive. That kind of fear is normal, in the moment, real. But all other fear is purely psychological in the mind. And it usually happens when people project themselves into the future and imagine all kinds of tragedy and difficulty and bad things happening to them. In that moment, when their mind is psychologically projected into the future, there now becomes hell. There now becomes fearful, fraught with all kinds of fear. Ultimately, all fear arises, psychological fear arises from the fear of death, the fear of annihilation. Because we don't know who we are as a divine soul, we don't know that we are eternal and immortal because we're identified with the ego. Why does the ego feel fearful? The ego feels fearful because it's not real. It's just a bunch of thoughts put together into some kind of story about yourself. And that takes on an identity, and that takes on an emotional charge, an energetic charge, because that thinking produces those emotions. And the primary thing that it produces is fear. When you're projected into the future, when you're projected into the past, or you're regressing into the past through memory of bad things that happen, traumas and things like that, then you get depressed. You get depressed and you feel guilty. And then you long to get out of that, so you project into the future, and then you feel anxiety because you think your future is going to be the same as the now, which is thinking about the past, feeling guilty, and feeling depressed. So let's talk about the nature of love versus the nature of ego. As it says in the Bible and in other sacred scriptures, the Buddha Sutras, and all of them, the Upanishads all say, love is unconditional. Love arises out of compassion. Love arises out of the care and concern for others. Even the sacred love between man and a woman should be so. It should arise out of the compassion and love and desire to be one with that person and to serve and love that person completely, to be there for them in every way, even in the bed, even in the midst of conjugal relations. But somehow, because the fall of man revolved around the corruption of those conjugal relations, two people that are totally in love, when they get into bed, sometimes turn into the ego and just abuse and use each other for their own pleasure. They lose love, and it becomes ego masquerading as love. See, there is no good love and bad love. There is no dualism in love. There's only love and ego masquerading as love. So what is the nature of this masquerade? The nature of the masquerade is possessiveness, control, jealousy, obsession. That's the nature of ego masquerading as love. See, love is one, and love is God. Love is God, and God is love. You don't have to say God before love for it to be God. Wherever there's love, in whatever form it is, whether it be worshiping God, or whether it be respecting your parents, or a friendship with your brothers and sisters, or conjugal relations, or the love that a parent feels for a child, it's all one love. It's all God's love. It's all just love. So any music that's written about love is music about God. It's divine, it's sacred. Whether it has the label of a religion or not. Gospel music is not the only true music. Religious music is not the only true music. It's much broader and vaster than that. Think about the symphonies that were created by Beethoven, Mozart, and all the great writers of that era. That all came directly from God as a download, and that's all divine. And it has nothing to do with having a religious label. So this idea that there's real culture or real music and there's secular music is wrong. The only wrong music is when the dark energy flows into the music of sin, such as gangster rap, or anything describing fallen nature, which carries that energetic charge. This is what we need to be aware of and be wary of. Not so-called secular music that's written about love or any of life's challenges or happiness and joy and things that uplift the spirit. This is all divine music. Okay? So how can we begin to shift our love from masquerade to reality? We've got to be able to recognize when jealousy arises, this is ego. When possessiveness arises, this is ego. When obsession arises, this is ego. Even as you're touching the person in the midst of lovemaking, what is the nature of that touch? Is it pure? Is it good? Is it just for the pleasure of the other? Or you're trying to get something out of their body to pleasure yourself at the expense of them? Okay? But because the fall of man has to do with the corruption of love by ego, we must learn how to really love. And we got to eliminate this idea that there's good love and bad love. There is no such thing as bad love. That's just ego masquerading as love. So make sure you understand that. Wherever true love arises in life, God is there. It's God. Matter of fact, I don't even like the word God so much anymore. I like the word love. Love is there. But love is so tainted by ego that we don't understand. We must purify our love. Purify the masquerade. Eliminate the masquerade. It's like a virus in your soul. Okay? So that's the nature of love, to be unconditional, to be true, to be pure, to be based on the other, not yourself. You certainly feel satisfied in yourself when you live for the other. And you never feel satisfied when the other must serve you. And you use the other for yourself. So are you ego-centered in this relationship? Are you whole-centered or God-centered or other-centered in the relationship? We've got to root out the problem of ego masquerading as love and restore our true love, because the source of all love comes from the conjugal. That's the primary, because that's the only way to be a parent. Conjugal love is the doorway into parenthood. Then you can feel the parental love. So first comes conjugal love. It's the most important. I mean, actually, first we feel child's love from the parents. Then we feel sibling love. Then we feel conjugal love. Then we feel parental love. That's the pattern. But the most essential is conjugal. And that's what Satan corrupted We've got to reclaim that by reclaiming our original innocence and removing Satan from that relationship. That would change the world dramatically. That would change the world from hell to heaven, as God originally intended, because the cornerstone of the kingdom of heaven is love. More than anything else is love. It says in the Bible, if you have faith, if you have hope, if you all these great things, but you have not love, you have nothing. Nothing. You're just caught up in the game of the masquerade of ego, pretending to love for its own agenda. And that love is the key to immortality. Why do you think Adam and Eve ate the fruit? Because it was more attractive than life itself. It had more power over them than life itself. They were willing to risk their lives to have it, to possess it, to control it. And this desire from Satan arose out of jealousy, because he was jealous of man's position as a child of God relative to his own as an angel, as a servant. So jealousy is not part of love. Some people say, well, if you're not jealous, then you're not really in love. No, this is absolutely false. In love, there is no room for jealousy. There's no room for possessiveness. There's no room for control. There's no room for obsession. Love is based on freedom. And if someday your lover wants to go, wants to be free, you should celebrate the time you had together and let them go. These forced marriages, these loveless marriages, are not good. If love goes out of the marriage, it probably wasn't love to begin with. It was just some form of masquerade. So it's better off you cut ties and you find the real deal, because there is only love. There is no good love and bad love. So remember that. Ego is masquerading as love and fooling all of us into its game. As it says in the New Beatitudes, love is the ultimate value in the kingdom of heaven. When you have God's love totally, you're in heaven. When you don't have God's love, which is the situation of almost all of humanity, because they're so wrapped up in ego identification, is hell and sin, division, disunity, chaos, violence. All these things arise out of the masquerade. And out of real love, God's love, or love itself, arises heaven. Beauty, joy, purity, goodness, innocence, all these attributes, justice, righteousness, generosity, wisdom, bliss, peace, silence, stillness, all these things arise out of real love. And all the others arise out of the masquerade, the negative. So this is why Jesus said, love God with all your mind, heart, soul, and strength, and love each other as you love God. These two great commandments supersede and absorb everything else. So when I see religious people fighting, arguing about doctrine, I just say, drop the bullshit and love each other. And then you're doing the will of God. Fighting, disagreeing, arguing about theological differences is pure ego. Doesn't do anything for anyone except bolster the ego of the person that thinks he wins the argument. There's no redeeming value whatsoever. It can never be the basis of a united world, of one family under God, of one divine human family, which is what we are trying to establish through this ministry. So remember, when you wake up in the morning, the first thought in your mind should be, how am I going to love today? How will I love? Who will I serve? And there's so many manifestations of that. There's so much creativity in that. You know? All the way from the simplest thing of sharing your food, or baking a cake for someone, or going to visit someone who's sick, or hopping in bed. Life is all about love. And if it's not, you're living an empty shell. You're living a worthless life, an emptiness that has no value to anyone, you or anybody else. So please, remember, when you wake up in the morning, the first thing you should think is, how am I going to love today? And who am I going to love today? And drop the ego masquerade. Okay? Thank you. Namaste.